My name is Rachel, and when I turned 30, I thought I was finally about to be seen for who I really was. After years of long nights, early mornings, and putting in the kind of quiet work that nobody brags about but everyone depends on, I thought my time had come. It was a Friday afternoon in Chicago, the very last day of the quarter, the kind of day where people are distracted, inboxes are quiet, and the office feels half asleep. That morning, I noticed something odd. My email had been unusually empty. No last-minute report. No quick check-ins. Just silence. And then, right in the middle of that silence, a vague calendar invite popped up on my screen. It came from Mark, our Director of Business Strategy. The invite said only one word: touchpoint. A touchpoint. That's how he described it. Like I was a loose wire somebody wanted to poke with a stick to see if sparks would fly. I stared at the invite longer than I should have, because in my gut I wanted to believe this was it. The big one. The conversation I had been waiting for. The promotion. The acknowledgement, so I dressed the part. I pulled out my navy blazer, the one that actually fit me well, not the boxy ones that made me look like a teenager playing dress-up. I even dug out a pair of heels I hadn't worn since before the pandemic. Back when office politics were still handled face-to-face, instead of over Slack or Zoom. By the time I walked into that meeting room, I was nervous, but I was also hopeful. 6 years I'd given to this company. 6 years of being steady, reliable, the one who stayed late. The one who fixed the reports other people ruined. The one who quietly flagged clients who were about to disappear, before anyone else even noticed. That was my specialty, seeing things before they happened. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but I was the one who paid attention. When a client's emails got shorter and sharper, I noticed. When their budget lines mysteriously shrank, I caught it. When they stopped responding to event invites, or went quiet for exactly 11 days, I was the one who raised the flag. Nobody asked me to do that. I just saw it, and I couldn't ignore it. So I built tools. I tracked behaviors. I created warning signs that helped us keep clients before they slipped away. And I did it not because someone told me to, but because I knew how much it hurt to lose them. So yes, when I walked into that room, my heart was pounding with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible anymore. Mark was already seated, his hands folded neatly in front of him, looking stiff, almost like a wax figure. Next to him was Dana from HR. That should have been my first clue that something wasn't right. But I ignored the warning in my stomach. I smiled politely, smoothed my skirt, and sat down like the hopeful idiot I was. Mark leaned forward, his eyebrows raised like he was about to deliver a toast. "Rachel," he said, "you've done an incredible job this year." And I smiled, because of course he started there. All promotions start with flattery, right? He continued, "Your insights into client risk have been game-changing. You've been steady, and your work has had a clear, measurable impact." My chest tightened. This is it, I thought. This is the moment. My internal voice was screaming, "Finally, finally, finally." But I kept my face calm, professional. Not too proud, not too eager. Just that neutral smile that says, "I'm flattered, but I'm also grounded." Then Mark glanced at Dana, and she gave me one of those HR smiles, the kind that shows teeth but not eyes. And then came the sentence that split my world in two. "That's why we wanted you to be the first to know before we make the announcement. We've decided to promote Brandon to Associate Director." At first, I thought I misheard him. My ears were ringing. My throat went dry. I blinked hard and said, "I'm sorry, Brandon." Mark nodded, as if this was some kind of gift. "Yes, we've seen real leadership potential in him. He has a way of energizing the room," Dana chimed in, nodding along. "People respond to him." I almost laughed. People respond to fire alarms, too. Doesn't mean you put one in charge of strategy, Brandon. Was the kind of guy who added emojis to spreadsheet headers and called it innovation. The kind of guy who once asked me if churn meant when a client cancels, or just when they're, kind of quiet. He was late to most meetings, left early whenever he had therapy, which usually looked a lot like bottomless mimosas with his CrossFit friends, but sure, promote him. He was visible. And apparently, that's what mattered. I don't remember the exact words I said after that. Something polite, something professional, something dead inside. I smiled, nodded, thanked them for their transparency, and walked out on legs that didn't quite feel like mine. I made it all the way back to my desk before it hit me. That slap across the soul, that hollow, aching realization that the last 6 years hadn't mattered the way I thought they did. But then I remembered I had something they didn't even know existed. See, I hadn't just been building reports. I had been building a prototype, a system, quietly, on my own time, in the margins of my evenings and weekends. A tool that used behavioral markers and engagement decay, curves to flag early signs of client disengagement, and it wasn't built on company data. It wasn't built on their servers. It was mine. I had decks. I had a name. I had a whole demo. My dream was to pitch it that quarter, to show them that real retention isn't reactive, it's predictive. But after that meeting, all I had was clarity, so I opened a blank document. My fingers didn't shake. I didn't cry. I didn't slam the keyboard. I just started typing .subject, formal resignation, effective immediately. The words flowed fast, precise, without a single dramatic flourish. Just clarity. When I finished, I attached a link, not to my resume, not to a list of accomplishments, but to something better, a private launch page, password protected, clean, professional, built with the help of a designer friend, 2 minutes long, a simple demo of what my platform could do. No details of the mechanics, no code, nothing proprietary. Just the results. Predict retention risk by account. Track it by age, communication, frequency, issue resolution, response velocity, satisfaction. Clean, sharp, undeniable. I sent the resignation email to Mark and Dana. 2 minutes later, I sent a separate message with the link. Since you're investing in leadership, I wrote, you might want to see what you just passed over. And then I logged off. I didn't pack a box. I didn't make a scene. I didn't even bother with a farewell speech. I just walked out of that Chicago office with my badge in one hand and my dignity in the other. That night, I didn't drink. I didn't spiral. I didn't drown myself in ice cream like in the movies. I ordered pad thai, changed into pajamas, and watched as my inbox lit up like a Christmas tree. At 5:12 p.m., Mark wrote, saw your message. Please call me. We should discuss this. At 5:26 p.m., Dana followed up. This came as a surprise. We'd love to schedule a conversation. At 6:41 p.m., someone from a competitor reached out, saw the link, and I knew I hadn't just walked away. I had walked toward something, because by then, my demo page was racking up double-digit views, then triple, then more, and the first call I answered wasn't from Mark. It wasn't from Dana. It wasn't from anyone at my old company. It was from someone who had actually listened when I once talked about predictive modeling at a networking mixer. Someone who knew what I was capable of. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't invisible anymore. By the next morning, my resignation email had more views than a viral cat video. Somebody had forwarded the demo link. I wasn't surprised. Cedar Point ran on passive-aggressive emails and Slack threads that started with, "Did you see this?" I pictured the wave rolling through the open plan office. Everyone minimizing their dashboards, clicking the link, and realizing, oh God, looks real. Because it was real, the demo wasn't just charts. It was polished, professional, and presented like something already on the market. Before and after snapshots. Clean UI, clear projections, nothing proprietary, nothing that could get me sued. Just enough to say, you could have had this at 9 a.m. I got a message from David, one of the few product managers I actually liked. He wrote, "Did you seriously build that yourself?" I typed back, "Not during work hours." His reply came instantly. Damn, it wasn't smug. It wasn't bitter. It was respect. And for me, that one word felt better than all the compliments Julian had ever handed out like stale candy. By mid-morning, the emails started flooding in. First, June. Our senior VP of strategy, the same man who once told me to soften the language in my review because it made me sound too insinuous, suddenly eager to align visions. And then, the industry sharks started circling. At 11 a.m., an email landed in my inbox from a woman named Nyla, a partner at a firm I'd never heard of before Brightline Analytics, one of those high-growth agencies with a name that could double as a skincare brand. She wrote, "We saw your demo. Would you be open to coffee and a conversation?" I hesitated, because here's the truth. I had just escaped a company that praised me in private and dismissed me in public. I wasn't about to walk into another room full of smiling sharks, so I did what I had never done before. I asked for more. I typed back, "If we talk, I need to know up front. This isn't just about hiring me. I'm looking for equity, autonomy, and platform ownership." I hovered over the send button, nervous, then clicked. Her reply came in less than 5 minutes. "You're not the product, Rachel. Your system is. We want to back it." I stared at the screen, because that was the first time anyone had said it out loud. The truth, I hadn't built that prototype just to prove I could. I built it because I was tired. Tired of watching companies hemorrhage clients and blame it on morale. Tired of hearing, "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it." As if the bridge wasn't already on fire. I built it because I saw the patterns first. Because I wanted something that listened back, and now, someone wanted to help me make it real, while I was cautiously hopeful. Back at Cedar Point, things were unraveling faster than I ever expected. David texted me again. Andrew is struggling. Of course, he was. Andrew couldn't forecast churn if it tattooed itself across his iced latte. I pictured him pacing in his new office, blinking at a report he didn't understand, stalling with phrases like, "Let's circle back on that." At 2:03 p.m., Julian finally called. Not emailed called. I let it ring out. A few minutes later, he sent a tortured message about recalibrating internal strategy and reconsidering how to best leverage my capabilities. Nice try. You don't get to hand a promotion to a frat boy for energizing the room and then beg me back once you realize the room's on fire. I didn't respond. The next morning, I met Nyla for coffee at a real cafe, none of that co-working space with a drip machine nonsense. She was younger than I expected. Sharp, direct, no small talk. Within minutes, she slid a slim deck across the table. "This is what we're building," she said. "This is how we think your system fits in. You'd own it. We'd fund it. We'd build around you." It didn't feel like a pitch. It felt like a correction. A correction for every meeting where I'd been told to let Andrew take the lead. For every slide deck I had rewritten behind the scenes without credit. For every time I had said something in a meeting, only to watch Julian repeat it 5 minutes later and get nods around the table. This felt different. By the time we stood up to leave, I already knew I was going to say yes. Back at home, I refreshed the demo analytics. 187 unique views, 3 new subscribers to the waitlist, Form.1 contact request from a company that had dropped us 6 months ago, now asking if I was available for consulting. I laughed out loud. At 4:46 p.m, the inevitable happened. Another email from Julian, this time with a calendar invite titled, Exploring New Opportunities Together. Translation, come back. Lead the thing. Save us. I stared at the email. And you know what? It didn't even feel satisfying, because that platform, it wasn't born out of their vision. It was born out of nights where I was too angry to sleep, out of weekends where I was told to stay in my lane, out of moments when I realized I was doing the work and making it easy for them to ignore me. So no, I wasn't going to walk back in and rescue them. I typed a single line in response, thanks, but I'm already in conversation with a firm that believes in this system without needing a breakdown to see its value. Click, send, done, for the first time in years. I felt the weight lift off my shoulders like a sigh. I'd been holding too long, but the story didn't end there. I thought their collapse would be slow, bureaucratic, missed deadlines, quiet reshuffling, the kind of organizational breakdown that ends with a cheery LinkedIn post about exciting leadership transitions. Instead, it took 3 days. On the 3rd day after I resigned, David texted me one sentence. Andrew is having a full-blown crisis in the war room. I blinked. War room. This was a marketing firm that once held Wellness Week by handing out lavender hand sanitizer. If they were calling it a war room, something was already on fire. I texted back, let me guess. They can't pull Q to risk projections without my tracker. David replied with a crying emoji. Then another text. They don't even know where the tracker is. Andrew asked if it's in Excel or Google Drive. I leaned back in my chair, laughing. Because here's the kicker, I hadn't deleted the tools I built. They were still there. Automated dashboards. Red flag alerts. Reminder workflows for account managers. Systems I coded on my own time, for free. And apparently, no one knew how they worked. Not even Andrew, who once told me, spreadsheets stress me out. Now, he was supposed to lead the team. Good luck by the end of that week. 2 long-term clients had already complained about slipping communication, standards, and inconsistent reporting. One of them was the same client I had. Flagged 4 times once in an email Julian ignored, and 3 times in Slack messages that got buried under a thread about Friday bagels. So yes, the cracks were showing, and they were widening fast. Meanwhile, I wasn't drowning. I wasn't scrambling. I was onboarding with Nyla's firm, except onboarding is the wrong word. I wasn't becoming an employee. I was becoming a partner. Brightline moved quickly, faster than anything I had ever seen. Within 48 hours of our coffee, I had a formal offer. Within a week, I had a contract, equity, resources, a development team, a product manager who didn't blink when I explained conditional churn modeling using sentiment decay. He just said, cool, we'll sketch the logic tree tomorrow. I nearly cried on day 9 after my resignation. Julian emailed again. Subject, retouch point opportunity. Body, Rachel. I understand you've moved on, but I'd still love to explore possibilities for collaboration. Perhaps there's a way to integrate your system into our structure with you leading that initiative. Translation. Please save us, but from the outside, so we don't have to admit publicly that we messed up. I didn't respond, because by then, I was in a glass-walled conference room with mapping out beta rollout phases and pricing tiers on a whiteboard full of sticky notes. For the first time in years, I felt something I didn't even recognize at first. Respected, and that's when it really hit me. Cedar Point never wanted my ideas. They wanted the results without admitting the source. But now, I was building something that was mine, on my terms, and they couldn't take that away. By the 3rd week, The cracks at Cedar Point weren't cracks anymore. They were sinkholes. Clients were leaving. Analysts were panicking. And Andrew was still asking where the magic dashboard lived. That's when the letter came, thick, heavy, like it had been designed to intimidate. Inside, a cease, dash, and dash desist. According to Cedar Point's lawyers, the system I demoed, the one I had built in my apartment on weekends, on my own laptop, with my own software licenses, was a derivative work developed under the scope of employment. Translation: we don't know how to build it, but if you try, we'll sue you until you stop breathing. I sat at my kitchen counter, the letter trembling in my hands. For about 10 minutes, I let the panic sink in, because that's what it does. It seeps into your chest, makes your ribs feel too tight. But then I laughed, because I knew what they didn't. I had receipts, flash drives, Git commits, time-stamped files saved at 11:47 p.m., 1:02 a.m., 3:15 a.m. weekends, holidays. Every line of code written on my personal machine, every workflow documented, every automation tied to my personal accounts, not Cedar Point systems. I wasn't stupid. I knew what companies like Cedar Point did when they got desperate. I had built this thing under the assumption that someday they'd try to claim it, so I kept proof. Mountains of it. Still, a lawsuit is a lawsuit. So I called Noella. She answered on the first ring. "Got the letter?" she asked. "Yes." "Good. Forward it." "Then delete it. Delete it." "Rachel," she said, her voice calm, steady, surgical. "They want you rattled. You don't get rattled. You get strategic. Forward it to me. Then clear your counter, make some tea, and get back to work." I breathed out, and for the first time since opening that envelope, I believed her. A week later, I was sitting across from our legal counsel in a conference room at Brightline. He was older, silver hair, the kind of lawyer who looked like he'd won arguments with judges just by raising an eyebrow. "They're trying to claim intellectual property," he said, flipping through the file. "But it's weak, very weak. They'll posture, they'll make noise. They're hoping you'll fold." I nodded. He leaned forward. "Question is, do you want to fight them, or do you want to bury them?" I blinked. "What's the difference?" He smiled. "Fighting them means defending yourself. Burying them means showing the court exactly how incompetent they are." I didn't hesitate. Bury them. 2 months later, there I was, sitting in a wooden chair under fluorescent lights, facing the same executives who used to walk past my desk without making eye contact. Julian sat at the far end of the table, looking thinner, tired, his hair not quite as perfectly styled as before. Andrew wasn't there. I wondered if he'd already been cut loose. Their lawyer stood up, full of confidence. He painted me as disloyal, as a rogue employee who had stolen company-developed strategy and repackaged it for personal gain. The judge listened, stone-faced. Then it was our turn. My lawyer didn't even break a sweat. He pulled up timestamps, emails, Slack logs, demonstrated, piece by piece, how my system predated Cedar Point's awareness, how it wasn't derivative of anything except my own insomnia. And then, the coup de grace, an internal email from Julian himself, forwarded to me by a sympathetic ex-colleague. It read, "Rachel's system is impressive, but let's hold off. Don't think she has the right experience to lead it." The courtroom went quiet, because there it was, proof they'd known about my system, proof they'd dismissed me, and proof they'd never lifted a finger to develop it. Their lawyer stammered, tried to pivot. The judge wasn't having it. "Case dismissed," she said. With prejudice, I exhaled. I had one. The ruling hit like a grenade inside Cedar Point. News. Leaked because news always leaks. The narrative wasn't Rachel stole IP. It was Cedar Point ignores talent. Loses to ex-employee in court. LinkedIn lit up. Anonymous posts, subtweets, a few brave employees openly congratulated me, and then came the calls. Not from Cedar Point though. Julian tried one last desperate voicemail, voice cracking as he said, "We can still work this out." No, the calls were from companies, agencies, investors, people who suddenly realized the system wasn't just a demo anymore. It was a legal, defensible product. Mine. By spring, we had a team of 6 engineers and 2 product managers at Brightline working full-time on the platform. The prototype became an MVP. The MVP became a beta. We named it PulseTrack. The dashboard was clean, elegant, predictive. No jargon, no noise, just signals. Early warnings, trend lines, churn probabilities with confidence intervals. During testing, one client saved 3 contracts in a single quarter just by acting on PulseTrack's alerts. That case study became gold, and they tried to imitate. Of course they did. They slapped together a retention insights dashboard that looked like it had been built overnight in PowerPoint. Clients saw through it. Within 6 months, 3 of their largest accounts defected. One of them signed with Brightline. By the end of the year. Cedar Point announced strategic restructuring, which is corporate speak for we're bleeding out. But let's pretend it's intentional. Julian vanished from LinkedIn for a while, then resurfaced as a consultant, which is what you call yourself when no one's hiring. And Andrew, last I heard, he was selling real estate. People asked me if I felt vindicated. The truth, not exactly. Vindication implies I had been waiting for them to collapse, waiting for karma to do its thing. But I wasn't. I didn't want Cedar Point to fail. I just wanted them to see me. But when they didn't, I built something that couldn't be ignored, and in the end, that was enough. 1 year to the day after I walked out of Cedar Point, I stood on a stage at a tech conference in San Francisco. Behind me, PulseTrack's interface lit up the big screen. Clean, sleek, alive. In front of me. Hundreds of people, executives, analysts, journalists. I told the story not of betrayal, not of lawsuits, not of collapse, but of patterns. How listening closely to the quiet signals can save relationships, contracts, even companies. I ended with this. They didn't see me, but I saw the patterns, and that was enough. The room erupted in applause, and as I stepped off that stage, I realized something. Cedar Point had been my cage, but PulseTrack was my wings. A year after the conference, PulseTrack wasn't a demo or a beta or a hopeful pitch deck anymore. It was real. It was living in the wild. 10 clients, then 20, then 50. Contracts ranging from scrappy startups to global firms who usually took 2 years to approve a new vendor. And every time a client told me, this system caught something we would have missed, I felt that same electric rush. Not revenge, not payback, just proof. Proof that the nights alone at my kitchen table weren't wasted. Proof that all the ignored emails and dismissed ideas had crystallized into something untouchable. But here's the thing, they never tell you about success. The higher you climb, the more you see who's still stuck at the bottom. Every time I opened LinkedIn, I saw younger analysts, data scientists, project leads posting the same stories I used to live. Does anyone else get their ideas repeated in meetings? How do you deal with being told you're not ready, even when you're already doing the work? The comments were always the same. Advice wrapped in diplomacy. Smile more. Soften your language. Be patient. And I wanted to scream, because patience had never saved me. My system had, so I started mentoring. Not the official kind with HR-approved talking points. The bactional kind, DM exchanges at midnight. Coffee meetings where we skipped the small talk. I told them the truth. You don't need permission. You need receipts. Keep your own files. Document everything. Don't wait for them to see you. Build something they can't ignore. Some of them listened. Some didn't, but the ones who did, they reminded me of me. And I realized this wasn't just about Polstrack anymore. It was about showing others that the door they keep knocking on. Sometimes you don't wait for it to open. You build your own, every now and then. Cedar Point still haunted me, not in a threatening way. They were too weak for that now. Just little echoes. A former colleague emailing, "You were right." It's chaos here. An ex-client forwarding me Cedar Point's last-ditch marketing campaigns, asking if Polstrack could do better. It always could. And once late at night an email from Julian. Subject line, "Congratulations," no body text. Just that one word. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply, because what was there to say? I had spent too long craving his recognition, waiting for him to see me. And now that he had, it meant nothing. The real victory wasn't the lawsuit, or the stage, or the applause. The real victory came in moments so small I almost missed them. Like when my lead engineer told me, "I love working here. It feels like my brain actually matters." Or when a junior analyst presented a feature idea during stand-up, and instead of nodding politely, I said, "Run with it. Let's see what you can build." Or when I caught myself staying late one night, not because I was covering for someone else, but because I wanted to. That's when I realized I wasn't running from Cedar Point anymore. I was running toward something. One afternoon, Nyla and I sat in our glass-walled office overlooking the city. She leaned back in her chair, sipping tea, and said, "Do you ever think about what happens if Polstrack outgrows us?" I laughed. "You mean if someone bigger tries to buy us out?" She nodded. I thought about it. About the zeros on the check they'd wave. About the headlines. About walking away. And then I shook my head. This isn't just software. It's a signal. It's a reminder for people like me that they're not crazy. That the patterns they see are real. That the work they do matters, even when no one gives them credit. Nyla smiled. "So we don't sell?" "No," I said. "We don't sell, we build." And for the first time, I wasn't worried about what came next. A few months later, I got invited back to my alma mater to give a guest lecture. Walking into that lecture hall, I felt a strange mix of déjà vu and defiance. Rows of students staring back, notebooks open, laptops glowing. I told them my story, not the polished version, not the sanitized one, the real one. The ignored ideas, the frat boy promotion, the resignation email, the lawsuit, and then I told them this. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for recognition. Build anyway. Document everything. Protect your work. And when they tell you you're not ready, remember, they're already using your ideas. That means you're ready. The room went still. Then the hands went up. Dozens of questions. And as I answered them, I realized something. This was legacy. Not just the product. Not just the contracts. But the ripple effect. Me telling the truth. So they didn't waste years waiting for someone else to validate them. One evening, almost 2 years after leaving Cedar, I drove past their old building. The lights were dim. The parking lot half empty. A For Lease sign hung in the lobby window. For a second, I felt that old sting. The sting of every ignored email, every stolen idea, every meeting where I was told to let Andrew take this one. But then the feeling faded, because Cedar Point wasn't my story anymore. It was just the prologue. The real story was still unfolding, with every client Polstrack saved, with every analyst who stopped doubting themselves because the system backed them up. with every person I mentored who built their own thing, their own way. So here's the truth. I didn't get closure from Cedar Point collapsing. I didn't get closure from winning in court. I got closure the day I realized I didn't need them to see me anymore, because I saw myself. And once you learn to see yourself, the rest, the applause, the recognition, the legacy follows. Not because they finally decided you were worthy, but because you stopped waiting for their permission. And that more than the lawsuit, more than the collapse, more than Polstrak itself, is the real story. The story of how I stopped asking, "Do you see me?" and started saying, "I see me." That's enough.